Hey everyone, welcome back to Elevate Your AIQ. On this episode, I'm joined by Eryn Peters and Iwo Szapar, two technology industry veterans who are actively shaping how we think about AI literacy, readiness, maturity, and transformation in the workplace. Eryn brings over a decade of future of work and technology adoption experience, while Iwo's varied experiences include driving remote work and helping thousands of companies reimagine productivity and change enablement. Together, Eryn and Iwo have created an AI maturity index that gives individuals, teams, and organizations a powerful way to benchmark progress, drive meaningful, personalized upskilling, and measure what really matters. We dig into what makes AI adoption successful, why responsible innovation is essential, and how to tap into the creative potential of every knowledge worker. This conversation epitomizes what Elevate Your AIQ is all about, and it's a really insightful and practical discussion. Thanks for tuning in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today, I have two special guests. I have Eryn Peters and Iwo Szapar. I didn't say that right, did I? Is that close enough?
Very good.
Szapar. Thank you both for being here. I know we sort of met middle of 2024 through the Open Talent community hosted by John Windsor, and I was just fascinated with what you guys were doing in terms of AI literacy, AI readiness, what I often call AIQ, and this AI maturity index that you guys have partnered to build. So I'm excited to dig into it. But before we do that, I thought I'd give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and a little bit about your respective backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, by the way, Bob. It's been a long time coming for sure.
For sure.
But I'm Eryn Peters. I've been in the future of workspace for about the last decade. I've mostly been working with freelance talent platforms and contingent workforce space, but also been a huge evangelist of remote work and digital nomadism in general, doing it before it was cool. But
Right.
the TLDR in the last 10 years of my life is really just enabling large-scale knowledge worker communities to kind of adopt new skills and learn new techniques to advance their careers, whether it's as a solopreneur or in a more kind of employee environment. So everything I do is trying to help workers at the end of the day.
Awesome. And Iwo?
I'm Ivo, and for the past 8 years, I've helped over 3,000 companies work smarter, not harder, from the giants like Microsoft, ING Bank, but also throughout startup and scale-up community. In my previous life, that change management was around remote and hybrid work, so that's what we've been doing since 2017. But then in the last 2 years, as the future of work and our lives are evolving around AI, we started to dig into how AI will change everything forever, hopefully for better as well. And that's how we got together with Eryn to work on the maturity index. We've done, I would say, a beta version of this as a part of the Remote First Institute. It was called the Remote Work Score, so kind of like a similar project. So a lot of learnings. Probably we'll also discuss this here. More on the private side, dog lover. My dog is looking at me right now. It's like, play with me. But I'm busy right now. Yeah, also love to write, surfing, traveling, DJing. Yeah, also a retired digital nomad as Eryn. And I love to talk.
Excellent. I heard you're DJing as well. Is that right?
Yes, still aspiring, still waiting. Like I had this, we shouldn't call them gigs. Like someone allowed me to play, but yeah, that's on the list of stuff to get better.
Jack of all trades, as they say. So let's dig into this AI maturity index. I know, Eryn, you had given me a preview. It was probably, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 months ago. And I really liked where you were going. I know it's even evolved since then in terms of the benchmarking and the dashboards. You just kind of unpack what this index is measuring and, target audiences and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I can tell a little bit about our journey as well, because this has
Please.
evolved as we've been learning for sure. So Eve and I were talking, maybe it was around May of last year, just about how, gosh, the media is really scaring people in talking about how AI is going to steal your job, right? And we just didn't really think that was totally true in the way that we know most people and knowledge workers are using AI.
Right.
So we actually set out as a research project to begin with to really understand how people are using the technology and what this actually means for the transformation of work and how people are changing their everyday lives. So it kicked off simply just to, in the hopes of maybe us getting some good content for a while, I would say. And as we started leveraging some of Evo's technology, where we were able to create a conversational assistant to collect this data, people thought it was such a great user experience. And we wanted to thank everyone who participated in the research with their own kind of reports on how they're doing so they could benchmark against their peers, both in industry or the same role as them, and learn where they can kind of improve their skills across a number of dimensions. So we collected this data over last summer, and we started giving people their reports around September timeframe. People thought they were so amazing. We want to do this for our teams. And we thought, okay, let's make a team's version of this report. So we look at a collective team or organization. So we were working on that throughout October, and we launched that in November. And then we saw consultants go, oh my gosh, these reports are amazing. We're helping so many organizations with their implementations of AI learning programs or governance and ethics programs or even technical implementations of things. And we have no way of measuring our progress with these types of change. So how can I use this tool in our practice? And this is when we created almost like a white label solution for consultants where they can leverage this within their own practices to advance the way that teams and organizations are transforming their businesses. So it's been a heck of a journey over the last 8 months. And the people who benefit from both our data and the tools that we're creating has evolved and changed as well. But the TLDR on your question is we help individuals, we help teams and organizations, and now we also help consultants.
Exactly. And kind of like this big vision that we're going after is to democratize access to such insights that up until now were available only for clients of PwCs and McKinseys of the world that you need to pay big bucks to get such insights and especially benchmarks, right? Because insights is one thing, but then like how you compare it to others, what are the others doing, etc. So with our approach where anyone can go in and do the index for free for them as an individual, and then obviously if you want to do it for a company or as a consultant, then this is different. But this is our mission to give anyone access to such knowledge. And as adoption grows, as the technology basically changes every day. So in order to keep up, you need to keep learning and keep implementing. We feel like we're just in the beginning of the project. Like we keep saying that it's also the end of the beginning when it comes to AI in general. So it was like this era of like, oh my God, what is happening? But right now we're starting to adopt things more seriously on production, etc. So yeah, very, very exciting project.
I'm really excited for you, and I'm excited for all of your clients because I feel like not only is this extremely valuable information, but I feel like there's, survey after survey just throwing out these statistics about, adoption or literacy or people falling behind. And, the last one I saw was yesterday. There was the disparity between people who claim they have an AI strategy and the people who actually giving, instruction and actually upskilling was significant. It was like a 35% disparity. It's like, what do you mean? What is this strategy that you claim to have where your people don't even know how to use it? They don't even know what tools to use, or maybe they're dabbling with an assistant like a co-pilot, but you have nothing in terms of like agents and other things, not to mention, as Eryn was saying, around, the responsible, are we using it appropriately and fairly? It just seems like it's kind of a mess. So, I mean, it seems like you're digging into the truth. I mean, I'm envisioning, going back to your original conversation back in May, like I'm envisioning like some really powerful and trustworthy statistics coming out of, your, data in aggregate across industries and roles and things like that.
Yeah. So if you look at AI being just another digital transformation, the common denominator of all the changes that we had in the workplace, this one being the most disruptive one, is that you need to start with data. You need to start with the assessment of where you are right now. You need to have this snapshot, right? And this is something that was always the case to understand this. But in pre-AI era, oftentimes it was either pretty inefficient in how you gather this data, then what kind of insights you can actually gather, because sure, you can send out the survey, but then what about the more in-depth questions? What about follow-ups? Then, okay, as a comparison, you can do user interviews, but if you have an organization of 5,000 people, how you do it, right? So I think like it doesn't matter if it's AI, non-AI, you really need to start with information. Okay, where we are right now, be honest with yourself that the environment is changing so rapidly. So this is the place where every single individual and organization should start, right?
Absolutely. The evolution that I saw, you've got sort of a methodology, a simple methodology, this step framework. I thought might be helpful to just for my listeners to just sort of unpack the stages that you take folks through in the index.
Yeah, definitely. So the STEP framework is more for the roadmap that we have that's trying to break down what is often incredibly complex implementation projects, whether it's for learning and development or straight up tech solutions, and try to break it down into components that people can easily understand. So STEP actually stands for segmentation, transition, education, and performance. And when you take any type of roadmap, especially multifaceted ones like AI adoption, where it's many stakeholders, many people, and many moving parts, then it just makes it a little bit easier for people to see what they should do next. Like, what is step number one? After I get this report and insights, what's the next action that I should be able to take? Who should be taking it? And with what types of resources? So we have a full kind of couple of months plan that you can see. Obviously, this is all dependent on the results that we get. So everyone's might look a little bit different. But we try to break it out in this step framework so that it's easy to understand what the takeaways can be and what you can implement tomorrow.
And do the clients typically have, I guess it depends on where they are and sort of the maturity scale, but I just wonder, like, if it comes out and there's specific courses or types of training that's needed, and is that something that they have at that disposal, or do you have partners that would come in and deliver specific, education, like modular education? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for anyone who comes to our individual report, just to our website, we have new education partners that will come through where we can recommend maybe some use case tutorials or online courses that you'd be able to take based on your skill level and where you're at. But this is also one of the reasons we wanted to partner with consultants was we can't possibly be the best implementation or education provider that's out there that specializes in specific technologies or industries or cultural nuance between regions. And so we are partnering with consultants who can use these insights alongside with their expertise to make sure that these implementation plans are successful. Because right now, 80% of AI implementation projects are failing. And a lot of it has to do with the lack of insights and a lack of support. So really just trying to bring the whole ecosystem together with these types of frameworks.
And also to your point earlier on this gap between the strategy and then the actual implementation, for some industries, even in some countries, can go between like 70+% companies claim that they have a strategy. Yes, maybe ChatGPT created it 2 minutes ago within one prompt, right? But then when you look under the hood, a few percent, the percentage of ones that are actually implementing Gen AI internally is tiny, right? So one thing is to understand where you are, the insights, the snapshots, then to get the recommendations. But then the moment of truth is with the pure change management, like how you implement it, how you then measure the change, and that how you optimize, right? I think one add-on to what Eryn mentioned, there's this like very simple aspect of the segmentations of tasks that anyone can do right after listening to our conversation. Just if they look at what they're currently doing and group them into three groups, right, of the tasks. One is, can I automate it? Can I augment it? Or should it remain human only? And this is so this is so simple, but so powerful. If you just break down your daily, your weekly, your monthly tasks, either as an individual or as a team, and then you start kind of grouping them into one of these three buckets. And what might not be possible today with the release of the new model tomorrow or in 1 week would be already possible, right? The stuff moves so fast that this learning curve that we're on is rapidly changing. So we need to really stay up to date. So it's really, really crucial to partner, to Eryn's point, with people that then can guide you not just on the general, this is how you implement AI, but maybe it's extremely specific to the automotive industry in Germany, right? Where there's a lot of specifics and maybe regulation, right? So the more niche down and the more verticalized the support then comes, the better for the overall AI adoption.
As you were describing that, I had a couple thoughts. One is people talk about like build versus buy versus borrow, and now versus bot, right? And so there's different ways to sort of segment that. And I know some research firms, consulting firms probably are looking at this as well. But what also triggered in my mind when you were describing that is something that I went through when I was doing an automation strategy for a large enterprise. So at least, I don't know, it seems like it was like 10 years ago, where we had to go through and figure out where could we, what was the effort needed to sort of automate certain steps of a process, and do we have to go get process mining software to even figure out where exactly those bottlenecks are, or do people know enough about their environment and their workflows and their processes to give us that information, because we didn't want to necessarily over automate something, but we didn't think about it at the time in the context of how we're thinking about it with AI, meaning now we're talking about how do we really maintain the human skills and our humanness.
Welcome to The Human Role, your go-to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and change makers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
About the things that we, humans should continue to do, right? Anything that involves decision making, a lot of things that involve experiences, certainly anything that involves creativity and curiosity and empathy and things like that. So is that something that you sort of guide your clients about when you do go into an organization, about how they think about this? This isn't just math, is it cheaper or faster to do it, to automate things or to augment things? But I'm just curious how you think about that.
We're focusing on the part where we provide insights. So full transparency, we're not working with clients on the actual implementation. This is where our partners, consulting companies using the platform are helping with. So I can speak from my experience also reading and like being part of the industry. I would say that today we're still at extremely early days of knowing what's possible and what's coming, right? When we're having talks with Eryn where we're sharing data from a maturity index on different conferences in different parts of the world, and we ask like, how many of you are using AI assistants? Quite a lot of people raise their hands. How many of you are using AI agents? A few out of hundreds raise their hand, right? So this is already like the fastest, the easiest way to kind of like see what's the level of AI. And of course, if you go on Twitter, X, and you read it, you might be like, oh my God, everyone is using this. Like no one is working anymore. Everyone is just using agents, right? But this is absolutely not true. So that's kind of like one stage where we are, and the fact that we just don't know a lot of things. And in 2025 will be the year when we'll really start to distinguish the difference between augmentation and automation, and this will really come into fruition when it comes to production use cases. So that's one. The second thing is that what kind of got me especially excited when I was still helping companies with remote work around AI is that can really help fix a lot of the challenges that we have at our workplace. That's simply how we work is not working. It's simply broken. We spend most of our times in meetings writing then pointless emails and just like going back and forth, right? So AI, and I see this with very simple use cases, especially around documenting how we work, transcribing meetings, having AI helping us to basically be this like operations assistant, right? So there are these like small things where our day-to-day work can be better. Doesn't matter if we augment, automate. And then in our data shows that 30% of people report better work-life blend because of AI, right? So if you look from the perspective, it's not about taking my job, it's about making my life easier. But then, of course, it's the question how I steer this and how my organization supports that. Then I benefit, organization benefits because we're going into a more professionalized work environment, right? But then, of course, there comes the question, okay, in 5-10 years, if AI is so superior, like AGI version 5, right? Like, where are we then? This is more of a fantasy right now. But so those are the questions that we don't know answers to. But I'm sure that we'll figure out how we did in our previous revolutions. There's always stuff to do. So I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, there's definitely always more work to do. And the question, I think, partly to your point, is how is the organization, assuming you're at an organization, not a solopreneur, how are they going to sort of reinvest, some of the savings? Are they going to reinvest it in the workforce, or are they going to reinvest it in, stock buybacks? And, what are they doing with the savings? On the automation side, I mean, you're going to have, at some point, you can have diminishing returns, right? And so the augmentation is where, the workforce ideally is being more innovative and, building stronger relationships and, doing the things that are actually driving, meaningful growth as opposed to just, cost cutting measures, right?
When we look at the difference between AI aware organizations and AI first organizations, we start to see the difference in the way that they can measure the actual value of AI, right? Like, I think that default in measurement is time saved times like whatever the salary was, right? It's like, oh, thank God we saved $6 an hour this week, something like this, right? Because we gained so much time. And this is like child's play when it comes to the measurement of AI, right? Because let's start looking at things like, okay, how much did we save because risk reduction? Because we had a system that was flagging, major errors in data and cybersecurity, and that's like immeasurable value that can be created. Or we look at the fact that people can brainstorm so much quicker and have peer learning so much quicker and like onboard faster, and like so many different ways to look at value and output, even with innovation. So I think we need to start going, okay, what is the real value that AI can bring other than the fact that, okay, Erin can work 5 hours less this week. Erin wishes she could go home and take Fridays off, but in reality, we're going to give her new tasks to do. Like we need to move on from this era of adoption.
Yeah.
One interesting point to what Erin mentioned about measuring how we work. Most organizations, let's take AI out of the equation, they don't know how to measure work, but they don't know how to measure productivity. Of course, we have OKRs, we have KPIs, we have revenue. But if you go down on the individual level and be like, is this person productive? A lot of times, this is a very subjective opinion, right? So like one of the exercises that we're going through with the A Maturity Index is to help you understand how you perform right now on the productivity, on collaboration, on communication, on innovation and creativity, et cetera, to kind of like start this process of like thinking, okay, this is what I'm doing right now. Those are the things that I could start doing. So if I automate this little thing, then I will have more time for strategic stuff or to spend time with my team, build these relationships. Or maybe instead of providing a very generic solution, then maybe we can go more in depth, more personalized, more towards different niches, right? And the same can go into like internal support. Maybe I have a very generic approach to my team, but now I can personalize this, like with learning, with whatever it is, right? So I think it opens up this conversation around like measuring things and improving to have less anecdotal data and then like real data there's telling you if something is green or red, right? And then second of all, to improve either the internal or external value creation, which at the end of the day will hopefully create a better world. Fingers crossed.
Of course. The scores that you get at different levels within an organization, I imagine some teams within an organization are further, perhaps much further along on the maturity scale than others in other organizations where they might just be more. Maybe it's a leadership issue. Maybe it's just a risk aversion in a particular department or things like that. But as you witness those disparities as part of the insights, and I guess what makes it actionable is to say, hey, you should, you guys over here are kind of slacking. Maybe you should go talk to, sales or customer service or whatever, whoever's like further adopting it. I mean, maybe there's collaboration opportunities or mentorship, opportunities. I imagine that's part of what you're trying to show them, that, not everyone is falling behind.
And I think this is the other thing, is that everyone is doing something well, right? And I think that's why adoption is so multifaceted, and we're trying to really measure each facet of adoption. So one of the things that has made me chuckle the most, I come from a background of working with tons of software engineers. And when they went through it, they were going like, oh, I'm going to be like 100 points. I'm going to be the top of the list. And then they go through, but they, yes, they might be using a lot in one specific area, but like their diversity of use cases or frequency or awareness of ethics and different aspects that all go into making this score, they might score very high in one dimension, but not in the other ones. And so I think if we look at it from this use case, is you don't have to be someone who's been doing AI ML programming for 10 years to score very high on this. But people who are really looking at all aspects of adoption, learning, and really challenging themselves, those are the people who are generally going to rank higher. So within an organization, we may have one department that ranks incredibly high in decision-making and leveraging AI for decision-making, whereas another is doing really, really well with communication. So instead of it going, hey, you guys are falling behind, what we're seeing is a lot of really great internal champions that can teach different aspects and share knowledge in ways that would be harder to articulate before. So I think it's just really giving people almost like this tool and compass within their own organization to see what is everyone doing well and how can we already learn from what we know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do leaders within these organizations, I mean, do they ever look at some of the results and say, oh, well, we're low on the maturity scale, like to your point, Eryn, like we're low on the maturity scale for using it in decision making because we have a policy that says we're only going to use it to, automate, or we're only going to use assistants. We're not ready for agents, something along those lines.
Yeah. And I mean, every organization will be different with their goals, right? Like, in fact, some organizations may prefer to get lower scores on certain things, right? Of like, hey, we are trying to gatekeep different areas.
Okay.
And this is coming from different types of implementations and controls, right? Which I think is always such a hot topic, is how much should you govern different aspects of usage? And should AI implementation be a top-down or a bottoms-up approach to these types of things? So I think, yes, leaders will have different thoughts on whether a score should be higher or lower, but it totally needs to align to what is the purpose of AI within their organization to begin with? And is their goal actually to drive more usage, less usage, more sophisticated implementations? Like, what are they really trying to accomplish? And then the insights will help them guide towards whatever that solution is.
And also the magical point that we see for many organizations that never worked with big consulting companies is that you can actually see how you benchmark against others, which makes it a bit competitive and be like, oh no, so the industry average is this and we're here. So this is probably like most people like competition and like a bit of a gamification, right? So one thing is to tell like you're here, but there's like the others are here. Like this is the gap that you can bridge, right? So if anyone is looking at like speeding things up and having data-driven decision behind it, this kind of methodology and this kind of approach helps you to push things through way faster.
Do you think that at some point when we look at like employer brand, data, maybe even like labor market intelligence data, that we'll start to see, metrics around AI maturity and things like that? Because I think this is, I don't mean to answer my own question, but it just seems like this is inevitable, right? At least last stat I saw was like, 77% of companies are prioritizing, hiring people that have AI skills, which I found extremely high, to be honest, because I mean, I look at job descriptions pretty regularly, and I don't remember the last time I saw someone specifically calling out, AI particular skills. I mean, maybe they talk about it when they get into the interview, but it's literally not in any just job descriptions that I see. Although I've had recruiters tell me that that's not quite the case, but it's certainly not. Didn't think it was 77% of the time. But if you know that these skills are important through, certainly all types of knowledge work, and I think, quite beyond, to at least be familiar with it, how it might help even back office stuff even if you're doing high volume hiring or even blue collar work, there's still AI somewhere in your work environment. And so anyway, so yeah, just want to get your reaction to that.
Oh, yeah. I've got tons of opinions about hiring, as you both know. But I think there's a few aspects to it, right? One, I think people are going to start being more vocal in both job postings and their applications about their culture and mindset around AI in particular, because a lot of organizations still view using AI as cheating. A lot of these are even ones that try to catch people out for writing their applications and their resumes with AI, right? But you know how they're catching them? By using AI in their applicant tracking system, right? So I think a lot of people are going, okay, maybe I love to use AI and I love experimenting, but if this organization is really restricting the way that they use it, or they're not really innovative with this type of technology, then I'm going to self-select away from using it, and vice versa, right? So you want to find like a cultural and mindset fit in addition to that skill set fit. But I think about AI skills in the same way that I think about how everybody is now a technology company. Like, tell me one company in the world right now that is not really using tech. We're all tech enabled in different ways, and this is the era that we're entering with AI. Is we're going to have AI-enabled organizations everywhere. And a lot of people don't even realize that they've been using AI within these companies for decades already, right? Like, machine learning isn't anything new. It's not novel. But now that we know about generative AI, people are starting to pay more attention to it. So I think the second component is, what is AI literacy? What is the baseline knowledge that is required for people to understand how these tools work? And how do we even articulate what our skills are? So I think this is one of the things that we considered when we were choosing conversational AI, is if I had a survey and I said, are you using an agent? Well, half people don't even know what an AI agent is. With knowledge workers today, it's not where we are on the adoption curve. But the other is, if I ask 10 different people what an agent is who know what it is, they're going to give me different answers. So by going through something like conversational AI, we can read between the lines and infer by them telling us their narrative and stories and use cases, and say, okay, we would classify their usage as this or that or otherwise. So when we talk about AI literacy when it comes to employment, what does that mean? Can they speak the same language as their employer that they're applying to? Can they actually know a little bit about how this technology works enough to operate it responsibly? Like, do I know that by going on my phone, my personal device, and putting things into ChatGPT, like, where's my data going? Like, these type of baseline elements are just going to be required for everybody. And I think this is really where those hiring managers are looking. I think you were talking about the Microsoft LinkedIn study that said 66% of leaders will no longer hire someone without AI skills, but 77% are willing to hire someone more junior if they have AI skills. So I think this literacy is really going to help people to leapfrog ahead in their careers if they don't have those years of experience that come in. But literacy is the first thing. Like, we have to speak the same language to know what depth of skills you need in different areas.
And I think just on the branding piece, I just think people that are starting to move ahead and becoming, real expert and have high, AIQ, I think is what I'll call it. Like, you'd probably be more apt to want to work for a company that's really embracing that, so you can continue to learn. I mean, there will be people that want to stay and mentor others and drive the strategy and lead by example and things like that. But I just think, as you look for companies that are early adopters and embracing what's coming and are willing to experiment, and I just think there's a cultural aspect to what's happening, despite some of the risks and despite the uncertainty, but it's moving fast. And I think that's what's, going back to what Ivo was saying before around like the transformation. It's not just bigger and more complex and more impactful than prior, digital transformations or other business transformations. There's also a lot more variability and, unknowns, right? Because you could just have, you could wake up, Monday morning and all of a sudden there's a new model that does all this other, reasoning and all this other stuff. It's just like, oh, I just got funded for a startup that was going to do that, and now it's just the next release of a foundational model. Like it's tough. It's tough to keep up with it all.
And I think it's also interesting if you look at younger generation expectations and the fact that not as many as in previous generations would like to be a manager. They would like to be individual contributor that is building, creating value. One, then you look at the shift in startup world from everyone wanted to be funded by a VC to more and more people would like to bootstrap and be the solopreneur that has all internal workflows, AI powered, a lot of agents working for him or her, right? And instead working 7 days a week, maybe works just 3, but still makes good money. Some Altman said that the AI will create world's first solopreneur billionaire, right? And then you take these two factors and bridge them within the organizational change. I think this is this aspect where organizations, if they embrace AI in the way how they should, by empowering individuals to experiment, to create, to maybe even build. I was just doing an interview this morning, and then we had a discussion on building kind of like within the enterprise internal products, like mini products, maybe even like mini companies that can become then part of the larger holding, right? I think there's such a huge shift. Not it's just how we will work, but also like how is the ownership structure potentially going to work within the company. That if you have these builders, creators that you work with that would like to experiment and go above and beyond, doesn't mean that they will work after 5 p.m. And this is totally fine because they will be so productive before 5 p.m. that they will deliver a ton of value. So the shift is happening on every possible kind of spectrum that you see. So if you're not embracing this and if you're not thinking outside of the box, but like really, really, really outside, not just talking about it and organizing and brainstorming workshops and like design thinking, but like really, really, really doing stuff, I think those companies will stay ahead of the curve and will attract the top talent, because top talent won't go to a company that is not embracing the future.
You're taking me exactly where I was hoping we would take this conversation, which is
reading
like,
your mind.
yeah, the concept of responsible innovation, right? I sort of I like the phrase, but I sort of dissect it, right? I advocate for responsible AI, and I do want to talk about that with you guys. But my background is largely around like innovation management and crowdsourcing and collective intelligence. I mean, that's how I wound up in the open talent community where we first met. So at IBM, we were doing all kinds of crowdsourcing and collective intelligence work from a market intelligence standpoint, but also from a sort of consulting research perspective and internal, projects and things like that. And so some of this is not, some of the literacy and some of the readiness is not just playing defense, right? Making fair decisions and not impacting, people negatively, adverse impact measurements and things like that. But how do we go on offense? How do we get people to embrace AI and see what's possible to develop new products and services, to enter new markets, to all the things that AI is empowering, humans to do, to tap into their curiosity and their ingenuity. And so the last program I led at IBM was doing exactly this. They upskilled everyone in what IBM Watson meant and what cognitive computing, as they called it, was capable of doing. And they asked everyone for their ideas, and they got like 15,000 ideas. And then they took them through, you built a team, got an idea, you built a team around it, you went through a crowdfunding exercise, you went through a Shark Tank or whatever. And then I led the community. So I led a project through that. And then I led the community of entrepreneurs, as we called them. The top 50 projects all had working prototypes, and we showcased them to the world at IBM's biggest conference. So there's an opportunity to incubate, I think, to your point, Ivo, there's an opportunity to incubate all these amazing ideas and tap into these creative, juices that everyone has ideas, right? But you've got to put some processes in place and maybe some different metrics in place around innovation. And
hi, we're Meg and Amy from the Meg and Amy Show.
We're not only tech execs and big picture thinkers, we're also best friends.
We're curious learners. And on this podcast, we're challenging the status quo and activating the future.
And we're going to give advice about work and leadership, right, Meg?
We can't help ourselves. But this podcast is about exploring possibility, not being right.
That sounds refreshing.
For more, tune in to the Meg and Amy Show.
And risk-taking, and there's a whole different sort of profile of people that could participate in that. But I mean, if you want to reverse shrinking attrition and you want to reverse this just pathetic, level of engagement inside organizations, I mean, these are some of the ways to do that.
Yeah. And I think what is different today when we're talking March 3rd, 2025, compared to when you're going through such exercise, I don't know, 5 years, whatever, is that if I have an idea to solve a specific problem, I can build a prototype today as someone that has no idea how to code, but I can still build a prototype that will have a front end and a back end, right? You can go to build it with Cursor, Replit, Bolt, etc., right? So this time from an idea that you can brainstorm with AI initially, and AI can can roast your idea, then then to create something that would look like this is an MVP of the solution that then you can bring in internally and start a discussion. This is this magic that was not possible because normally you would have meetings and brainstorming and workshops, and which is totally fine and still should happen. But then this first step could be just you and you, AI, and then it's a question of how much time you spend on iterating until you have something that is ready then to be discussed internally. This is mind blowing. I'm right now able to build apps when I'm eating breakfast, and I have zero coding experience, right? So it's just a lot of the education that needs to happen internally, externally, that this is possible. But then again, we will still have the same challenges of, okay, but how you come up with the problem statement? What are the problems that are relevant? How you all of this stuff still exists. It's just that the cost of intelligence is going to zero. The cost of producing products is also trickling down very rapidly, but still all of the challenges with implementing this into the real world remain the same.
Right. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. So you've got the ability to hyper accelerate the actual, idea to working prototype. But to your point, you still need to understand, well, if I have 2,000 people and they all do that, I still got to figure out which of these is, valuable, which has, sustainability through, does it align to, what we do here? Or is this just sort of a one-off or things like that? Yeah, there's still a lot of the steps can't necessarily be skipped. That's a fair point.
I think if we think about it from the two lines of the same quadrant, if it's a top-down or bottoms-up approach, and if it's high control and low control, each quadrant has its own challenges, right? If you have too little control and it's a top-down approach where you're saying these are the only tools that you can use and the only applications you can have, people are going to have shadow AI. But you guys are talking about is this really beautiful, guided empowerment aspect where you still have leadership that's saying these are the big, hairy problems we're trying to solve, or these are the domains and areas we want to have them. And here's your toolkit. But you're really allowing a bottoms-up approach of people who know the nitty-gritty of a company or an organization or, those specific problems that can then build and solve these solutions. So I think it's all a balancing act of this can't be a lawless place where everybody can implement a new tool tomorrow. And it also can't be, a total top-down approach where people could be potentially out of touch with the actual tools that are needed to do a job, right? So I think we're still navigating what this looks like in a modern organization.
Yeah, for sure. And I think any innovation management kind of funnel, you'll still get better ideas if you define what some of those challenges are, right? As opposed to just random stuff or something that will only help an individual in their particular scenario. Ideally, you'd have something that is scalable. On the responsible AI piece, I imagine through the maturity index, there's a whole section on, ethical, responsible practices, fairness in decisions, things like that. I'm curious how people are scoring on that set of questions.
Yeah, for individuals, we kind of keep it around ethics awareness. Like, are you aware of some of the ethical concerns that can come from AI? And we kind of explore what that means to different people. When we look at the team reports, then especially for our consultants tool, they have the ability to ask additional questions that are very specific to that organization. So if you want to see, hey, do you even have a policy? Yes or no? Are you aware that one exists? Like, these types of things are very generic. But if I want to go down to a specific part of HIPAA compliance with data and how we're managing AI tools in healthcare industry, that's something that isn't necessarily a great question for us to ask to all industries, but a specific consultant might want to look at. So we are keeping it at a high level and fairly broad of, do you know that there's ethical concerns? What does that mean to you? And like, do you guys have any type of policies or things that you want to do? But when it comes to like more nuanced questions around governance and responsible use of AI, it is subjective, I will say.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So hypothetically, if I wanted to use this with my advisory clients, I'd be able to, have a whole section. I'm doing a lot of work on like human-centric AI. So I could basically just augment what you've built with some specific questions for my audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So I think what you were talking about, Eryn, is where you might have specific examples to go deep into where there might be regulated industries and specific privacy concerns or whatever. I was curious if there's any other interesting observations or requests from people in different geographies based on location, local regulations, culture. Anything interesting you might want to call out.
Yeah, I'm happy to call out some of the industry stuff. And actually, Ivo's done some interesting research on Saudi because we were just there for some conferences. So I'll throw it over to him next to share some interesting things about how different regions are actually leveraging this. But I think when we look at volume of usage and the comparison across industries, it's kind of like all the usual suspects, right? Technology industry and everyone else, they're using it more, they're experimenting more. But oil and gas industry, education, healthcare, finance, these are the ones that we're seeing with the lowest overall penetration of AI within their workforces. And it comes with high regulation. And that's just goes hand in hand, right? Is you either come from a culture where it's experiment, move fast, and break things, which oftentimes in tech it is, like innovate first, regulate later, or regulate first, move carefully, test things in a controlled environment, and then launch them more broadly. Like, these are obviously going to impact the velocity of adoption with any new technology in these different industries. So we're not seeing tons of differences than you would probably assume across these different industries. But, there are some more traditional roles that I would say are accelerating rapidly. Like, I would say law and lawyers, right? They typically aren't seen as being super innovative when it comes to technology. But law, AI, and legal tech is like really booming. You have all different types of programs like Harvey AI or Inspira out of Brazil that is making all of the open cases from 14 different courts available to everybody and training on internal law firms' knowledge bases and making their own LLMs. Like, we are seeing some instances of specific roles and sectors that are going to leapfrog ahead where we probably thought that they were going. But I want to throw it to Ivo to talk a bit more about geographies too, because we are seeing some of these cultural implications move very differently. Like, Saudi is such an interesting area because of their Vision 2030 goals and their innovation approach to technology. So he did some cool stats pulling.
Saudi, for those that don't know, like, been part of the AI game before the ChatGPT moment. So they've been heavily investing in AI education, AI upskilling of the workforce, but also obviously building infrastructure, etc. But with all of the investments and activities, we also see kind of typical thing that a lot of companies all over the world have right now. So the strategy is there. So over 70% of companies in Saudi report that they have the strategy, but then only 8% actually implemented Gen AI internally, right? And if you look at the kind of like, why is that? I mean, it's obvious. Like you start with the strategy, but then you need to implement it, right? So this is like this moment when why the gap exists. But then if you look deeper into like, okay, so how the knowledge workers are using AI there, I think Saudi is an interesting example where they are leading how you use AI for decision making. It's like number one country and scoring in AI for decision making. So they're embracing AI here and also how AI impacts their psychological well-being. So I think this is extremely interesting to see, like I was saying, 30% in general of the users of the index report such increase. But then if you look at some of the areas of opportunity, for example, productivity is not as high as it should be. So I think no one is perfect. Even companies like top-notch companies from Silicon Valley that are AI first, AI native, whatever, like, and why? Because a score 100 out of the 100 is changing every day. Like one day you have 100, but then the next day something new comes up and it's possible and you don't have 100 anymore, right? So you keep chasing this 100. I think this is also what makes it so interesting and playful.
Yeah, absolutely. Eryn and Ivo, thank you so much for spending so much time with me. I think this is a really insightful conversation and a really important episode for folks to listen to because this is such a pressing need to make sure that people are really ready for AI. It's not going away. It's going to be with us as the future of work evolves. So thank you so much for being here. And I'll make sure to include links to your resources in the show notes of this episode, including your newsletter, Eryn, which I've really been enjoying. Thank you again for spending time with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Bob. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.